energy we were looking for. Well, good morning, guys. I'm so excited to be up here this morning. It's going to be a good morning. I've had this message kind of in my brain for the last couple weeks, so I'm really excited to share it with you all. And like Mr. Tootin said, we are in a series that's about DNA. So for the next couple of weeks, we're going to be talking through who we are, who we want to be, and where we come from, right? What's actually ingrained in us and who we want to be. And so I've been tasked to talk this week about compassion, right? Which is kind of the easy low ball throw because I'm the school counselor, right? So of course I'm going to be the one that talks about compassion. But what I'm hoping is that today I'm going to talk about compassion and maybe a way you've never heard of before and kind of put some new ideas in there. And so we're going to dive in. But before we dive in, I want you to know that this is a message in two parts. So the first part, we're going to talk about how we use compassion to help ourselves, right? And in the second part, we're going to talk about how we use compassion to help other people. Now, I know that all of us here in the room today, we're all in completely different places, right? We're all facing different things, experiencing different things. We're in different places in our faith. So I'm going to give you permission today that if all you need is part one, that's totally okay. I'm going to let you know when we're moving on to part two. But if you kind of really resonate with part one and you're like, I'm good, that's what I needed today, then great. And when we get to part two, if you're like, no, I'm ready to move on and I need to know how to extend this out, then we're going to go there together. Sound good? All right, awesome. So today we're going to talk about compassion. But in order to talk about compassion, we need to talk about another word, and that word is comparison. Now, those two words don't seem like they go together, right? When we think about compassion, we think about compassion as something where we're extending out a hand and helping someone else, right? We're helping someone else get through something. When we think about comparison, we're thinking, I'm looking at what I've got, all of the things that are in my world and in my lane, and I'm looking at all of the things that are in somebody else's world and somebody else's lane, and I'm comparing the two things. So what do they have to do with each other? We're going to get there. But I want to talk about this famous quote that we always hear when we hear about comparison. Does anybody know what quote I'm talking about? They say comparison is the thief of all joy. The Bible, probably. We don't know. It's said by a lot of people who are Christians, so the Bible probably says that, right? Yeah, it doesn't. Nowhere in Scripture does the Bible say that comparison is the thief of all joy. Actually, Teddy Roosevelt said it. Shout out to all my history teachers in the room. And then I did a little more digging, and it turns out that Teddy Roosevelt didn't actually say that. The only place I can find it is mom blogs on the internet. So it's the only place. So someone literally just made it up one day and was like, okay, yeah, comparison's the thief of all joy. Right? And it's so well intended, you guys, because what they're trying to say is, listen, when you look at what you've got and what you want when someone else has got, you're not going to have any joy, right? But I want to argue that comparison is only dangerous when we add something to it. So what I want to know is, what does the Bible actually say about comparison? What are the things that it actually warns us against? And there's three phrases that I came up from three different verses in the Bible. The first one is seeking approval. The second one is coveting. And the third one is measuring. Now, when we are seeking approval, here's where this gets dangerous, right? Seeking approval is not necessarily wanting someone to like me, right? Now, I would be the first to raise my hand and say, I want people to like me. I think everybody wants people to like them, right? We're literally ingrained to want people to like us. But seeking approval is different, guys, because seeking approval means you are going out of your way to change your behavior in order to get someone to like you, right? This is not just I really want someone to like me for who I am. Sure, we all do. No, seeking approval is you are going out of your way. You're going to change something about yourself, change something that you would normally do to get someone else to like you, okay? So Scripture warns us about that. Second thing that Scripture warns us about is coveting. Now, coveting is a very similar thing, right? there are always going to be people who have what we want and we don't have, right? That in itself is not dangerous because I'm always going to want, I'm always going to desire. What's dangerous is when I start obsessing and changing my behavior to make sure that I just continually am envious and jealous of this person. It's all I can think about, and it's all I can manage is to just think about what this other person has. Again, the key in both of those, right, in both seeking approval and coveting, is I'm changing my behavior to suit the desire, right? I'm actively doing something to make sure that, I'm in that dangerous territory. But it's this last one that I really want to talk about today, and it's the measuring. Right? And so the thing I want to argue today is that comparison is only dangerous when we start measuring. I'm going to say that one more time because that's kind of our big idea for today. Comparison is only dangerous when we start measuring. Now, when we're measuring, you all have been in science class, you've all done labs, right? You're taking a certain substance, you're seeing how much of it there is, right? You're usually putting a number to it, you're usually putting some kind of value on it, some kind of qualification on it, right? And in order for us to seek the approval of others, right, we have to measure something inside of ourselves and determine that it's inadequate, and then change it in order to get other people to like us, right? In order to covet something, we have to measure ourselves, find it inadequate, measure the thing in someone else and go, no, that's so much bigger and so much better than what I have. So it's measuring, right? Measuring is the dangerous thing. And in order to judge someone, we have to look at them, we have to measure what they have. We have to deem it to be inadequate, and then we go, I'll never be that, right? It's all about the measuring. It's all about us taking it and putting qualifications on it. And so I want to encourage us today, guys, we need to stop measuring the unmeasurable. Half of the things that we are measuring in life, we shouldn't be measuring. We have no business measuring, right? I'll give you some examples, right? Beauty is immeasurable. It's not measurable. And if you are looking at me and going, well, of course it is, because I can tell you who's more beautiful in the room and who's not, I'm going to ask you who set those standards, right? Who decided what was beauty and what was not? Who decided what was handsome and what was not, right? Pain is unmeasurable, right? Have you ever been to the doctor and you're like doubled over, and then they just look at you and they're like, so on a scale of 1 to 10, how much pain are you in right now? That ever happened to anybody? Yeah, it's happened to me before. And the thing is that your doctor can't get inside your brain to determine how much pain you're in, right? They have to ask you. You are the only person that can express a level of pain. And so one of the things we have to be careful of when we're looking at compassion is predetermining how much pain someone is in, right? Because they are the only ones that can tell us how much pain they're actually in. We can't get inside their heads as much as we might want to. Another thing is that our gifts and talents are unmeasurable. And this is where we get into a lot of trouble, even when we're not realizing it, right? Because I'm going to take a look at all of the gifts and talents that I have, and then I'm going to go over here and I'm going to look at my friend and I'm going to look at all of the gifts and talents that they have. And I'm going to make a decision in that moment about whether I think I have better or more gifts and talents or less and worse gifts and talents than the person I'm sitting next to, right? And these things, guys, they're unmeasurable. You can't measure them. You can't put numbers to how much artistic ability someone has, how much athletic ability someone has, how smart someone is. There's so many things that have been pre-decided for us, right? So many things that our world has decided that we should be. And so the question I want to ask you guys is, when it comes to measuring, who made the ruler? But more importantly, I want to know who made your ruler. I want to know if you guys have ever seen like those giant yardsticks, right? Where they've got all of the little tallies that show you the different measurements. And guys, we walk around all day long writing things in between those tally marks, right? Making decisions about what we are supposed to measure up to, right? And, you know, I'm a counselor, so I live in the world of testing, right? And so a great example of this is SAT testing. And SAT testing is a strange thing because it is literally a test that is designed to tell you how smart you are, how good at test taking you are, right? And some of you have worked so hard to get those test scores to a great place. And we're gonna celebrate that, y'all, because that's awesome, right? But I'm also gonna argue that it's one way to measure how smart you are, not the way, right? And it's dangerous when we start saying that things like SAT tests determine how smart we are, because we're letting that test be our ruler when it's never been the ruler. Now, is it a good thing? 100%. I'm gonna advocate for it all day long. But don't let it be the ruler. Don't let it be the thing that determines your value, right? I wanna know who told you what the standards are, because someone told us at some point what those standards were. They said, you have to go to school, you have to get good grades, you have to look like this, you have to be this, you have to make this joke, you have to act a certain way, right? We were told at some point along the way what our standards were, and then we started writing little things in those margins of our rulers. So I want you to sit and think this morning about what you're measuring. What are you measuring within yourself? And what are you measuring in other people, right? Because that's gonna tell you a lot about what you value, and it's also gonna tell you a lot about where you think you're falling short. And the key point, guys, is that we can compare without measuring. So remember when I said that this was 2 parts? So that was part 1, right? Part 1 is all about how are we measuring ourselves against other people? And how are we gonna help ourselves in the midst of that? But now I kind of wanna segue a little bit, because we're talking about compassion today, and we're talking about DNA. And so I think it's important that we also not only look internally, but we look externally, right? So I said at the beginning that you need comparison in order to have compassion, right? So if we're looking at comparison without the measurement part, right? We've taken the measurement completely out of it. Now all I'm doing is when someone comes to me and they're expressing a hurt or a need or a desire or something within them that they need to share with me, right? I need to compare my life experiences to that person's life experiences. And the reason why I need to do that is because if I don't do that, then I have no context to approach the problem, right? I'm only going to be as good as my past experiences allow me to be, right? And so I need to make sure that I'm coming at it from a humble place, first of all. And I need to make sure that I'm coming at it when I do have the expertise to provide, that I can provide it, right? And so when people come to us, we need to compare our life experiences to theirs. Now, that doesn't mean we're measuring, right? We're just comparing. But in that comparison, we're gonna come to one of 3 conclusions. And so we're gonna go over these today. And in each conclusion, I'm gonna give you what I'm calling a compassion job, right? So this is, someone is coming to you, they're expressing a hurt or a need, and in each of these conclusions, you have a different compassion job, right? So let's go ahead and dive into the first one. The first one is someone comes to you and you have never lived that. So you are sharing with someone different life experiences and they just lost their grandparent. And you've never lost your grandparent. You don't know what that's like. You still have all of them, right? They're all with you. And so you've never lived something like that. So let me tell you what your compassion job is here. Your compassion job is to listen and learn. Because if I have never been through that, if I've never experienced it, I have no authority to speak into what that person is experiencing. Can I love them? 100% I can love them. But sometimes we get into a dangerous place. And guys, my high schoolers in the room and my adults, I'm going to challenge all of us. The most dangerous place that we get into with this is when the person is younger than us. We automatically assume that we have the authority to speak into what they're going to, even though we've never been through anything remotely like that, just because they're younger than us and we're older and we're supposed to have more knowledge than them. But that's not how it works, because we're so shaped by our experiences that sometimes we've just never been through it. Guys, people come into my office all the time that have experiences that I have never had, right? And my job is to listen and to learn. Now, there's two parts to that. The listening part is the part where I completely hear them out, right? I hear everything that they've been through, but the learning part is where the love happens. Because learning involves asking questions. Learning involves diving into the issue with them. Learning involves helping them to understand the depth and the complexities of what they're experiencing. And you can't do that if you just go, yeah, right? There is an exploration that has to take place in order for us to love people who are going through things, yeah? So even if you've never been through it, you can still explore it with them. And you're gonna learn some stuff along the way that's gonna benefit you too. Second thing is I've lived something like that. So this is someone has lost somebody very important in their life, and you can't really relate to that, but you know what it's like to feel alone, and you know what it's like to be broken, and maybe you had a loss, but it didn't look like somebody else's loss. And so you could have lived something like it. So if this is where you are when someone shares something with you, your compassion job is to identify with the emotional experience, right? Because a lot of times when we are going through something, one of the greatest ways that we can be shown love is to have somebody let us know that we're not alone in what we're feeling, right? All of our experiences are going to be very, very different. But a lot of us can identify with those core feelings like loneliness, sadness, depression, anxiety. We've all been through some degree of that to some extent because our world is broken, right? And so your job in this lane is identify with the emotional experience. Help them to know that they are not alone, right? Now, quick caveat, because this can get a little dangerous, is try not to immediately pull your own experience into it and be like, oh, well, I know exactly what you're going through because when I was 4, this happened to me, and then my dog died, and then this, right? It's because that can very easily get into a lane where you're trumping on the other person's pain, right? So just make sure that when you are doing this, you're identifying without pulling your own things into it, right? There's a time and space for all of us to share. And then here's the last one. And this last one is, I've lived that. Right? So this is the lane where someone is sharing something with you. Someone is going through something, and you have walked exactly what they are walking. And so your compassion job, when this is the truth, is to walk it with them. There are going to be things that you can do and that you can say that other people are not going to be able to speak into. Because you've walked it, you've experienced it. If you are comforting someone whose parents are divorced and your parents are also divorced, there's a special kind of love that you are going to be able to provide for this person, right? There's a special kind of attention. You're gonna know exactly what this pain looks like. And I'm gonna flip the switch for a second and say, if you're on the other side of that this morning and you're in a lot of pain and you're experiencing something specific, I want to encourage you to find someone who's lived it, because they're going to be able to speak into it in a way that is so different from other people. Now, are you going to need all three of these? Yes. When I'm going through something, I need the person who can just listen and learn. And I need the person who can identify with the emotional experience. But I'm going to need the person who's lived it. And so there's kind of two sides to this, right? There's the side of what do I do when I'm hurting? And there's the side of how do I help someone else when they are hurting, right? Compassion is a two-way street. Always. It's going to go both ways. When you give compassion, compassion's going to come back to you. And I know this because we were set a beautiful, beautiful example in Scripture. So I want to read this passage from John, and I'm going to kind of tie this together and kind of help us to understand how this integrates into our faith, yeah? So John 1:9-14 says, "The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God." Right? So we're in this DNA series, and we're talking about who we are. And Scripture is so clear on how we were created, why we were created. And that's going to become a part of us. It's inescapable. It's something that we have always been born to do, and we can choose to either run from it or to embrace it. Compassion is not something that we take on. Compassion is something that we have inside of us, and we can choose to run from it or we can choose to embrace it. And I don't know about you, but for some of you, DNA is kind of a tricky topic because you're not proud of the DNA that you come from. And I think that there's something that happens that's really important when we choose to embrace who we were made to be. And it doesn't look like an earthly family. It looks like we are spiritual beings that were created to do and to be something greater. So when you guys are making a choice, I don't want you to think of this choice as going in one direction or going in the other, and I'm standing in the middle at neutral. Guys, when we were never made at neutral. We were made with good intentions. We were already set on a path towards good. All you have to do is let go and release and let it go, right? It's like a car that's attached to a string at the top of a hill that's going down. All you got to do is cut the string and the car's going to go on its own, right? And so I want to encourage us as we're exploring our DNA, as we're exploring what it looks like to be us, to think of this series as something that you were always meant to be and something that already exists inside of you. It's not something that you have to manufacture. Now, it is something you're going to have to work at. But I don't have to fight to have compassion. It's there already. And then my job is to take that raw compassion that's inside of me and learn how to use it, right? To mold it and to shape it and to turn it into something that does good for people. God came down to the world, and the world did not recognize him. The thing he created, it's the strangest thing. He created us, he made us, he came down to be with us, and then we didn't recognize him. And that happens because we don't get to look at our DNA face to face a lot. But that last compassion job, that walking with us, guys, God has earned the right to speak into our situations and to love on us in a very specific way because he came down and walked it with us. He lived it. If he had stayed up in the sky, in the nether sphere, wherever, and had just presided over us from above and had never come down to live it with us, then yeah, there may be things that we'd be able to say, God, like, you don't understand. But the thing is that he walked it and he lived it. There's actually a place in scripture where it says that he had to endure every kind of temptation. And I believe that that was because he had to know how to walk with every single one of us. And so when we're talking about that number 3, when we're talking about finding the people that can walk it with us, I'm going to encourage you to do 2 things. I'm going to encourage you to find a person who's lived your experience. And then I'm also going to argue that no one is going to have fully lived your experience in your body. And you're going to have to turn to the only entity that has and can. If you're comfortable, I'd love for us to close our eyes and bow our heads and just take a moment. And I've asked you a couple of questions today, and for some of you, today is going to be a day where you are starting to discover what it is that you are measuring and how to stop measuring that unmeasurable thing. For some of you, it's going to be about finding that person who knows what you've been through. And for some of us, it's going to be about embracing who and what we were called to be. It's okay to let go. It's okay to not know what's coming for you next, and to lean into everything that you have always felt in your soul that you are supposed to be, but we're too scared to be. Guys, that's what a relationship with God is. We're going to find out more about ourselves in our relationship with God than we will from anybody else. And Lord, I just pray over this morning that you would take over the room. God, that you would call upon us as individuals who have specific DNA within us, a special calling, a special purpose, and help us to embrace that. And God, I call upon us as a collective. God, we're a family. We say all the time that we are family. And part of being a family is sharing DNA. And that shared DNA